Dear friends, in the heart of modern-day Chicago, a young Muslim man named Zayd struggles with his faith, identity, and purpose. Haunted by his past and confused by his present, Zayd finds himself lost in a world of distractions, parties, and meaningless success. But everything changes when a tragedy forces him to return to his estranged grandfather's house, a man who holds the key to Zayd's spiritual awakening. Through a series of heartfelt conversations, forgotten stories, and a mysterious journal, Zayd embarks on a transformative journey. He revisits his childhood, confronts his ego, and begins to understand the power of salah, repentance, and purpose. With faith as his compass and trials as his teacher, Zayd slowly uncovers the true meaning of success, not in wealth or fame, but in connection with Allah. This story blends Islamic values with relatable American experiences, designed to deeply resonate with young Muslims navigating today's world. Dear friends, Zayd Rahman stood on the 25th floor balcony of his downtown Chicago apartment, looking down at the city lights flickering beneath him like a bed of stars. The wind was crisp and loud, yet inside his mind, there was nothing but silence, a kind of silence that didn't bring peace, only emptiness. He had it all, or so people thought. A six-figure job in tech, a sleek black Tesla parked in a reserved spot, designer clothes folded in a walk-in closet, friends who called him a beast for how fast he climbed the ladder, a $1.3 million condo with a skyline view. But none of it mattered tonight. Inside, on the kitchen counter, lay an untouched bottle of champagne, gifted to celebrate his promotion. But Zayd hadn't touched it. He didn't drink, not really. He mostly pretended to hold a glass at parties, swirling soda in a wine flute, laughing at jokes he didn't find funny. He ran his hand through his slightly curly black hair, eyes weary. He hadn't prayed in weeks, maybe months. He'd lost count. He had stopped going to Juma when work started demanding more of him. "I'll pray later" turned into "I'll catch up tomorrow," which became "what's the point anymore?" Zayd didn't hate Islam. He still said "Inshallah" and "Alhamdulillah" when talking to his mom over the phone. He even had an Arabic calligraphy frame on his wall. But truth be told, it was more decoration than devotion. His phone buzzed. "Aliyah. Congrats again on the promotion. Drinks this weekend?" He sighed. Aliyah was part of the life he'd built in this modern jungle. Beautiful, witty, non-Muslim. She didn't ask him about his faith, and he never brought it up. They weren't serious, just enough to not feel alone. But Zayd was alone, deeply. He stared again over the edge of the balcony, not suicidal but curious. Curious if falling through the fog would feel like freedom or terror. Curious if God still cared about a man who had once memorized Surah Yasin, but now couldn't remember the last time he opened a Quran. The next morning, Zayd got the call. His mother, her voice trembling, said only 4 words. Dada Abu passed away. Silence. His grandfather, his rock, the only man who had taught him how to pray, how to ride a bike, how to say Astaghfirullah when he messed up. Zayd hadn't spoken to him in over a year. He didn't even know why. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was laziness. Maybe he just didn't want to face someone who saw through all the shiny lies. "I booked you a flight. Today," his mom said. "We need you." That evening, Zayd sat by the window seat on a flight to Dallas, Texas, watching the clouds roll past like pages of an old story. His AirPods played lo-fi beats, but his heart was echoing something older, something he'd buried. The house in Dallas was exactly as he remembered. White walls, brown shutters, and a creaky gate that whined like an old soul when open. The small garden in front was now overgrown, but the rose bushes still bloomed defiantly, as if they hadn't heard about death. Inside, the air smelled like old books and cardamom tea. His mother greeted him with puffy eyes. His younger sister, Fatima, hugged him without a word. And then came the hardest part, entering Dada Abu's room. Nothing had changed. His cane still leaned against the wall. His prayer rug, frayed and soft, lay neatly folded at the foot of the bed. And on the small table next to the bed, a leather-bound journal sat with a Quran on top. Zayd sat down, picked up the journal, and felt a chill run through him. On the first page was a note. "To my grandson Zayd, when the world grows too loud, read this. and remember who you are. He clutched the journal like a lifeline. Later that night, when everyone had fallen asleep, Zayd stayed awake reading it by a dim yellow lamp. It wasn't just a diary, it was a legacy. Entries filled with du'as, reflections, dreams, and reminders. One line stood out to him: "There's a fog in every heart, but only the light of faith can pierce through it." Zayd closed the journal and cried quietly. Not because his grandfather had passed, but because something in him had just started to come back to life. That night, for the first time in months, he rolled out the dusty prayer rug in the corner of the room. He wasn't sure if he remembered every word. His body hesitated through each motion. His eyes stayed wet the entire time. But when he said, "Allahu Akbar," it was as if the universe paused for a moment. The fog wasn't gone, but for the first time in a long time, he could see the light breaking through. The next morning, Zayd got the call. His mother, her voice trembling, said only 4 words. Dada Abu passed away. Silence. His grandfather, his rock, the only man who had taught him how to pray, how to ride a bike, how to say Astaghfirullah when he messed up. Zayd hadn't spoken to him in over a year. He didn't even know why. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was laziness. Maybe he just didn't want to face someone who saw through all the shiny lies. "I booked you a flight. Today," his mom said. "We need you." That evening, Zayd sat by the window seat on a flight to Dallas, Texas, watching the clouds roll past like pages of an old story. His AirPods played lo-fi beats, but his heart was echoing something older, something he'd buried. The house in Dallas was exactly as he remembered: white walls, brown shutters, and a creaky gate that whined like an old soul when open. The small garden in front was now overgrown, but the rose bushes still bloomed defiantly, as if they hadn't heard about death. Inside, the air smelled like old books and cardamom tea. His mother greeted him with puffy eyes. His younger sister, Fatima, hugged him without a word. And then came the hardest part: entering Dada Abu's room. Nothing had changed. His cane still leaned against the wall. His prayer rug, frayed and soft, lay neatly folded at the foot of the bed. And on the small table next to the bed, a leather-bound journal sat with a Quran on top. Zayd sat down, picked up the journal, and felt a chill run through him. On the first page was a note: "To my grandson Zayd, when the world grows too loud, read this, and remember who you are." He clutched the journal like a lifeline. Later that night, when everyone had fallen asleep, Zayd stayed awake reading it by a dim yellow lamp. It wasn't just a diary, it was a legacy. Entries filled with du'as, reflections, dreams, and reminders. One line stood out to him: "There's a fog in every heart, but only the light of faith can pierce through it." Zayd closed the journal and cried quietly. Not because his grandfather had passed, but because something in him had just started to come back to life. That night, for the first time in months, he rolled out the dusty prayer rug in the corner of the room. He wasn't sure if he remembered every word. His body hesitated through each motion. His eyes stayed wet the entire time. But when he said, "Allahu Akbar," it was as if the universe paused for a moment. The fog wasn't gone, but for the first time in a long time, he could see the light breaking through. Zayd awoke to the faint sound of birds outside the window, sparrows chirping their morning hymns, like nothing had changed. But something had. His body felt sore, not from travel, but from the unfamiliar pressure of sujud. His back had forgotten the weight of prayer. Still, the ache was oddly comforting, like the soreness after a good workout, a sign that something dormant was waking up again. The house was quieter than usual for a morning home. Maybe because most of the crying had already been done the night before. Or maybe it was that Dada Abu had passed the way he lived, peacefully, gently, with dignity. After Fajr, Zayd sat cross-legged on the floor of his grandfather's room. The Quran lay open before him, its Arabic script soft and familiar, like a language he once spoke fluently, but now only remembered in pieces. The leather-bound journal called to him again. He picked it up, flipping past the first entry he had read the night before. Each page was a window into a soul much deeper than Zayd had realized. His grandfather hadn't just been a man of routine prayers and soft smiles. He had been a warrior of the unseen, battling his own doubts, fears, and regrets with patience and remembrance. One entry was dated just a year ago. Zayd hasn't called in weeks. I miss him, but I know he's finding his way in a world that often forgets Allah. I don't judge him. I only pray that he remembers his place, not in society, but before his Lord. Zayd felt his throat tighten. It wasn't guilt, not exactly. It was something more tender, regret, mixed with admiration. Another page began with, "Sometimes faith doesn't feel like light. Sometimes it feels like digging through darkness, just hoping there's something bright at the end. But I dig anyway, because Allah never lets a sincere heart return empty-handed." Zayd stared at the sentence for a long time. No one in his world ever talked like that. At work, vulnerability was weakness. On social media, faith was an aesthetic. In his circle of friends, God was either a joke or an awkward subject. But here, in the quiet scribbles of a man he had once dismissed as old school, Zayd found a raw, beautiful honesty. His phone buzzed on the floor beside him. "Aliyah, you disappeared. Everything okay?" He stared at the message, unsure how to reply. Everything wasn't okay, but something was becoming okay. He replied, "My grandfather passed. Taking a break from the noise. Talk later." She sent back a heart emoji. That was the last time he heard from her. Later that day, Zayd joined his family at the masjid for the janazah prayer. The men gathered in neat rows, shoulder to shoulder, as the imam stood before the shrouded body of his grandfather. "Allahu Akbar," the prayer began. Zayd followed, his heart heavy but grounded. As the takbirat echoed, he found his mind no longer wandering like it used to. For once, he was present, fully. After the burial, old family friends came to offer condolences. Uncle Farouk, who used to pinch Zayd's cheeks as a child, Auntie Salma, who always brought mangoes during Ramadan. They all said the same things. "Your grandfather was a saint. He never missed a prayer. He always had a smile for everyone. He helped my son get his first job." Zayd listened quietly, wondering how many lives his Dada Abu had touched without ever posting about it or asking for recognition. Later, after the guests left, he asked his mother, "Why didn't I know more about him?" She gave a sad smile. "You were too busy growing up, and he never forced himself into your world. But he always prayed for you." Zayd nodded, feeling a lump in his chest. "Did he ever write anything about his childhood?" She looked surprised. "He wrote a lot, actually, boxes of journals in the attic." Zayd's eyes widened. That night, like a boy searching for buried treasure, he climbed into the dusty attic. The air was thick and the wood creaked beneath his feet. But in the far corner, under a faded blue tarpaulin, he found them. 5 boxes of journals. Some were decades old, handwritten, yellowed pages, ink smudges, margins filled with du'as and poetry. He picked one at random and opened it. 1979, Karachi, my first day at madrasa. I missed my mother, but I knew I was here for something greater. Page after page, story after story, tales of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of walking miles for Quran classes, of selling shoes to help his father pay bills, of giving his only jacket to a classmate who had none, of dreams, of heartbreak, of miracles. One line jumped out again. "I want to leave behind more than memories. I want to leave behind light." Zayd closed the journal and leaned back against the wall, surrounded by the writings of a man who had built his life around one thing. But he wanted to. For the first time in years, he wanted to become someone his Dada Abu would be proud of. Not because of a degree or a salary, but because of how he bowed in prayer, how he treated people, how he lived when no one was watching. Before going to bed, Zayd made wudu. The cold water hit his face like a slap of truth. In his room, he opened the Quran, not on an app, but the real one. The one with his grandfather's neat handwriting in the margins. He began to read, slowly. Not for reward, not out of guilt, but out of longing. He still had questions, doubts, guilt, and confusion. But for once, he wasn't looking for perfection. He was looking for the path back. And the journal had shown him. It starts in silence, in prayer, in tears, in trying. It starts in the fog. The morning after the light discovery, Zayd woke with a weight in his chest that felt different. Not heavy like dread, but heavy like responsibility. The journal had planted a seed, and now, Every small thought was filtered through a new lens. He wasn't sure where this path led, but for the first time in a long while, he felt the urge to move. He dressed in simple clothes, an old navy hoodie and jeans that had seen better days. He could have gone back to the city that afternoon, retreated into the safe fog of meetings, emails, and curated happiness, but something held him in Dallas a little longer. Maybe it was the quiet of the house. Maybe it was the worn edges of the prayer rug. Maybe it was the memory of seeing his grandfather's pen strokes on the margin of Surah al-Fatiha. He walked to the local masjid on foot. The neighborhood was a patchwork of traditions: Mexican bodegas, Black-owned barbershops, and small apartments where laundry flapped like flags. It wasn't the sleek world of tech meetups and hotel conferences. It smelled like fried onions, rain-soaked concrete, and the faint sweetness of rosewater from a nearby salon. The walk wasn't long, but it felt like the longest he'd taken in years. Inside the masjid, old men nodded to each other, and children chased each other's shadows across the tile. The imam, a soft-spoken man with silver in his beard, recognized Zayd from the burial and offered a quiet salam. Zayd slid into a row near the back. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He closed his eyes as the call to dur echoed through the speakers, raw, imperfect, but true. He felt the vibrations in his chest like a heartbeat syncing with something bigger. The prayer ended. People scattered slowly, exchanging news, advice, magazines with articles about fasting tips, and here and there a plate of dates offered to a passing child. The imam approached Zayd. "You're Zayd, right?" he asked. His voice had no judgment, only curiosity. "Your grandfather told me once, before he got quiet, that you were going through something." Zayd's mouth opened, then closed. I didn't know he told you. He told me many things. That you had a bright mind, that the world was loud for you, that you had a light if you chose to polish it." The imam smiled. "He also asked me to do something if you ever came back." Zayd looked up. "What?" The imam reached into a satchel and pulled out a small folded paper. On it was a simple line in his grandfather's handwriting. "Tell Zayd, start with the minaret. Learn to climb something small before expecting to reach the top." Zayd felt a sting of tears again, not from grief, but from the realization that his grandfather had anticipated this moment, that even from the silence of illness, he had passed down a design, a blueprint. "What does that mean?" Zayd asked hesitantly. "Start small," the imam said. "Minaret is a tower, but it doesn't begin with the top. It begins with every step. Find something you can do consistently. A good deed, a habit, a moment of stillness. Build it, then climb." Zayd nodded. The idea of structure felt foreign. His life had been built on reactive habits, answering emails at 2 a.m., scrolling through feeds, attending networking mixers that left him drained. Nothing had been built with intention. Nothing had a foundation. He left the masjid with the paper folded in his wallet like a promise. Back at the house, he made a list, not of tasks for work, not of goals to impress others, but of tiny things. 1. Wake up 15 minutes before Fajr and sit quietly. 2. Read 2 pages of the Quran every day. 3. Call his mother every evening, not just to talk business, but to ask how she slept, what she ate. 4. Find one person a day to do something kind for without expectation. 5. Turn off his phone for 1 hour after Maghrib. He didn't call it a plan, he called it steps. He started that night. The first step wasn't perfect. He overslept and missed the first 15 minutes before Fajr. But he still woke up before sunrise. He sat on the windowsill, blankets around his knees, and watched the sky turn from navy to pale blue. He didn't speak. He didn't even open the journal. He simply listened to the distant hum of cars, the chirp of a lone cricket, the rhythm of his own breath. That silence, for a man who lived in noise, was a climb. He picked up the Quran and read 2 pages. His lips tripped over a few pronunciations. He glanced at the margin notes, his grandfather's little circles around certain words, a tiny star by a verse about patience. The pages smelled like incense and dreams. He called his mother that evening. "How's Dada Abu's rosary?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She laughed, the kind that sounded like rain hitting a tin roof. "Still where he left it. Fatima keeps it on her nightstand." "Zayd, you sound different. Is something shifting?" He hesitated. "I don't know. I just want to try something. For him, for me." She said, "That's good, Beta. Just don't lose yourself in trying to be something you're not. Let it come from your heart." He didn't tell her about the paper, the imam, or the list. Some things, he decided, needed to be built first, then shared. Over the next week, the steps became rhythm. Small victories came like the quiet taste of water after a long thirst. He found himself offering his seat to an elderly man at a grocery store. The man's eyes shone in gratitude, and Zayd felt lighter than after a promotion. He stopped mindlessly scrolling through his phone before bed and instead wrote a sentence in the journal, just one, about what he was grateful for. A co-worker back in Chicago texted to schedule a meeting. Zayd didn't jump on it immediately. He replied with a time that gave him space to breathe and sent a quick dua silently before hitting send. He began to understand something his grandfather had written long ago in the old notebook. "The world gives you busy to keep you blind. The minaret is built in a pause." One night, Fatima came into his room while he was reading. "You've been different since Dada Abu passed," she said. "You've been here, but not like before. Is it good different?" He smiled. "I think so. I'm trying to climb something, one step at a time." She sat beside him. "Dada Abu used to say when I was little, even the loneliest star climbs in silence." I didn't know what he meant then. I think he meant every small thing matters. Zayd folded his hands around his tea. "He left me instructions, not to rush, to build." She nudged him. "Then build, Zayd. Don't let the fog come back while you're looking at the top. Enjoy the climb." He realized she had always been a mirror for him, small, unintentional truths that reflected larger realities. On the 10th day, Zayd visited the masjid again. He had a new habit now. After prayer, he would stay 20 more minutes helping clean the shoes area, chatting with the youth who came in asking for help with college essays, and sometimes just holding space, while an elderly woman recited old lines from the Quran, her memory tremoring, but her tongue still sharp with faith. The imam approached him with a cup of chai. "You've been coming," he said. "Your grandfather would be proud." Zayd looked down at the cup. "I feel like I'm only starting." "Starting is the bravest part," the imam replied. "Most never begin. They admire the minaret from the ground but never take the first step." Zayd thought of the paper in his wallet. The metaphor of the minaret had become less abstract. It wasn't a distant tower anymore. It was an ongoing act. His steps were small, but they were real. That night, he wrote in the journal for the first time, "I don't know the ending. I only have the next step. I hope it's enough." He closed the journal, whispered, "Subhanallah," and fell asleep with the weight of purpose, not heavy, not light, but steady. It had been 3 months since Zayd's return to Dallas. His beard had grown fuller, not long but intentional. His eyes had a different weight to them, not from exhaustion, but awareness, a stillness, the kind you only find in people who've been through a storm and come out holding faith like a torch. He had started volunteering part-time at the Masjid Youth Center, giving talks, helping kids with resumes, organizing weekend retreats. He wasn't preaching, he was simply present, and that made a difference. His tech job still called from Chicago, loudly. They offered him a higher position, head of strategic innovation. Bigger salary, more prestige, an apartment twice the size, a team of 20 under him. And yet, he delayed. He didn't say yes, not right away. Then came the call that tested everything, his father, the man who had left when Zayd was just 10, who had remarried and rarely reached out, who had missed birthdays, graduations, and even the janazah of his own father. Zayd's Dada Abu. "Son," his voice cracked through the speaker, I'm in town. I'd like to see you, if that's okay." Zayd froze. Forgiveness had been a theoretical concept for him, a verse in the Quran, a Friday khutbah theme. But now, it was a man with a broken voice on the phone, asking to meet. He didn't know what to say, but something deeper, something rooted in the soil his grandfather had tilled for years inside him, pushed out the words, "Okay, tomorrow, after Maghrib, at the masjid." The next evening, Zayd stood in the courtyard of the masjid under fading twilight. His heart beat like war drums in his chest. He clutched his grandfather's journal tightly, as if it could shield him from decades of unspoken pain. Then he saw him. His father looked older than he remembered, thinner, tired. His eyes, once stern, now sagged under the weight of time and mistakes. He wore a simple gray button-up shirt, no fancy watch, no airs. "Zayd," he said. Zayd didn't speak. He just nodded and led him inside. They sat on a bench near the wudu area, the same bench where Zayd had once tied his shoes as a boy, holding his grandfather's hand. His father cleared his throat. "I came because I've been reading about death, a lot, about time, about God. I don't know much anymore, but I know I hurt you, and I know I hurt your grandfather too." Zayd's eyes stayed on the floor. "I'm not here for excuses. I'm not here to fix everything. I just want to say, I'm sorry." Silence. The kind of silence that stretches time. Zayd closed his eyes. Flashes of childhood came rushing back. Waiting by the window, asking his mom where Dad went, pretending on Father's Day that it didn't hurt. All those years he built walls around his heart just to survive. Then he thought of a line from his grandfather's journal. "You do not forgive because they deserve it. You forgive because your heart deserves peace." Zayd looked up. "I'm not ready to call you Dad," he said, "and I won't pretend like none of it mattered. But I don't want to carry this anymore. Not the hate, not the weight." His father nodded slowly. A tear rolled down his cheek. Zayd stood and offered his hand, not out of affection but as a sign of surrender, a truce. His father stood and embraced him. It wasn't warm, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in that moment, Zayd realized this was the real climb. Not reading the Quran, not waking up for Fajr, not even volunteering at the masjid. The real climb was taking your broken heart, scarred and unsure, and still choosing mercy, still choosing light. That night, Zayd returned home and opened the final pages of his grandfather's journal. The very last entry read, "Zayd, if you ever read this, the world will pull you in many directions. But if you find the courage to forgive, to pray and to serve, you've already succeeded. Don't wait to be perfect. Allah wants your effort, not your illusion." Zayd wept for a long time. Then he stood for prayer. This time not just with words, but with everything. The fog wasn't entirely gone, but now he knew where the light was, and he had begun to walk toward it.